Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dan Hanford, and my wife, Danae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur. Before we get started, let's hear from one of our sponsors. Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HanfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HanfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HanfordCapital.com.
On the podcast with us today is Dave Lukas. He's a serial entrepreneur, a best-selling author, and real estate investor. He's also the host of a weekly podcast called the Misfit Entrepreneur. Dave, thank you for being on with us. We are looking forward to talking with you today.
Well, it's great to be on with you guys and great to be on with all of you in the audience.
Thank you so much, Dave. I want you to kind of walk us through really quickly what you're doing right now and where's your current focus as an entrepreneur.
And so I have a few different focuses. My largest company is actually a software company. We do business in about 100 countries. It's a multi-time Inc. 5000 winner. It's called Grasp Technologies software. So that's where I spend, I'd say, the majority of my time, 60 to 70% of my time. And then still investing in real estate, have a holdings company, and we're a buy and hold group. That's what we do. And then I have a trading education firm that I started years ago underneath a small little hedge fund that actually teaches market investing in some very specific ways, to people that want to create additional income without having to put in professional trader like time. That's called 12-minute trading. So I do that. And then we have the podcast, which was actually originally started as a side project. My wife and I adopted our daughter about 5 years ago from China. And bringing her home, I'm keenly aware of the fact that we're conditioned to be who we are really from the time we're born. So the minute I had this child in my arms, I'm teaching her. And so I found that all these things were bubbling up to the surface in these teachable moments, even with an 18-month-old child, that I'd learned from a lot of the greats, the Zig Ziglars, the Brian Tracy's of the world, people that I'd gotten to work with, Tony's, all those guys and gals. And I said, gosh, there's got to be a way to immortalize this amazing information so that Hannah, my daughter, can have it even after I'm dead and gone and learn from her daddy and his misfit friends. So that's kind of how it all started. And like I said, it kind of started as a side project, something to do and kind of set aside for her. And it took off. Here we are about 18 months later and listened to in almost 100 countries and just growing like crazy.
Well, it's really exciting to hear you talk about that, Dave, because one of the things that Danae and I have talked offline about on a couple of occasions is that very same thing, immortalizing this content so that really what we're trying to do is provide content and material for our children when we pass away, because we don't know how long we're going to be on this earth. We could be tomorrow that we're gone, but we can have something that we can leave behind for them where they can still continue to learn from us and the experiences that we had. And then we can also connect them with people all across the world. We're not in 100 countries yet. We just launched this back in June. And, as of this recording, we actually have a little over 29 countries right now outside of the United States. I think we have 30 right now. And it's really exciting to kind of see how the podcast grows and things like that. How many years have you been an entrepreneur?
I always answer this question with, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 5 years old.
Yeah, I would say that mine was a little earlier than that. So I would probably say mine was probably, as the doctor slapped me on the behind, I was trying to negotiate with him which behind to slap because, that kind of thing. So you've had a lot of experience since you've been 5 years old, obviously, a lot of tough decisions you've made. I'm sure it's probably hard to condense it down to, the top one or two, if you will. Yeah. But can you share with us one tough decision that you have had to make along this journey as an entrepreneur?
How about I give you two? I'll give you one from a business standpoint and then one from a personal standpoint. How's that?
Sure. Awesome.
All right. So from a business standpoint, as everybody knows, as you grow in a business, growth is a great thing, but it's also very challenging. So I take Grasp Technologies as an example. For over 10 years straight, we grew at over 100% a year. And so that's great. It's awesome. It's amazing what you can do. But at the same time, growth sucks cash, and we funded everything out of our cash flow. We didn't take on any investment. We have no debt, and that's a great place to be nowadays. It's a hard thing to do for businesses. And so there's a couple challenges and hard decisions that had to come up during that time. After growing that fast and for that long, we reached a point that we literally were close to really crumbling underneath our own weight. There's a blessing and the curse of growth, right? Because once you grow to a certain size and you're moving that fast, if you don't take the time to put the systems and things that you need to put in place, that eventually comes back to haunt you. And we essentially, like a lot of businesses do, flew by the seat of our pants, quote unquote. And so we reached a point where we woke up one day and it was like, hey guys, you got about enough money to last another week. So what are you going to do? And that was probably one of the hardest decisions ever to come about in the business, because we had to make a ton of decisions in that moment, right? And we had to figure out how we were going to survive. And we also wanted to do it in a way that we could still take care of our employees. We had at that point about 15 or so employees and their families that depended on us, and so we took downsizing, labor force and that stuff off the table. So when you do that, that makes it even harder. And so we had to figure it out, and we did the hard things you have to do, right? We had to cut a bunch of number of areas. We had to go to our vendors that we had, negotiate longer payment terms and that sort of thing. We had to go to our clients and ask, them to forgive us, and maybe in some cases we asked for them to pay a little early and things like that to kind of get us out of that hump and make our way through. But it was extremely challenging in the moment. And a lot of things had to be done within literally a 5-hour, 10-hour period to be able to move forward from that. And so the lesson that you really learn in those things is that you only should focus on what you can control, because everything else doesn't matter, because you can only affect certain things. And so the hardest thing for people to do is not to panic and let emotions get in the way and all that stuff in the moment that derails them. And so that was a fine-tuning moment for us as leaders and my business partner in the company, to where we really had to learn to set that stuff aside and learn to really thrive under pressure, and systematically work the problem and fix it.
One of the things I want to know, Dave, is what have you guys done and put into place so that doesn't happen again in the future? Because obviously when you go through that, it's really challenging. But once you get through it, you also look back and go, all right, how can we mitigate this from happening in the future?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what we did. I actually just talked about this in the 100th episode of Misfit Entrepreneur, because we did the top 10 lessons learned from 100 interviews. And one of those is about systems. And so after we kind of got through it, got ourselves back on, footing to where we had some running room, we looked at ourselves and we said, okay, look, we're never going through this again. And we had to take kind of that hard look inward and say to ourselves, okay, the things that we don't want to do are the most important things that we need to do, which is literally write down the steps of every single process, systematize everything we can, bring in a better, CFO, money manager, that sort of thing. So, we slowed down for a good year, probably, and slowing down for us was still, 30, 40% growth, but that was a huge difference from growing at over 100%. So we literally put the brakes on, for an entire year and went to work. And, I have to say, I used to be the guy that really just, I don't need all the details. I just want to get done, get the results, and move on, right? I now appreciate the details so much more, because that's what will make or break you. So if you have a business, no matter where you're at, from day one or wherever, you should always be looking at how you can document and systematize the different processes, the different things you do in your business to succeed. And then also create the training programs to teach others to do that. It will help you to scale exponentially better by doing that earlier on, even when you are running very hard and it's the last thing you want to do, maybe at the end of a day, is to write out a process, but it will make the biggest difference. And it took at that point, being a multi-million-dollar company at that point, even it took a whole year to do that for all the things that we do. And then even once we were done with it, the challenge was getting the adoption, because our teams were used to running the way they were. And so now they had structure in place more than they'd ever had before. And they had to adhere to things. And At first, it was, we didn't see much benefit, but within a couple months of implementing things, really saw the difference. Profitability was up. Everything was working better. Stress levels down, all that.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth, talks about this and about how you should put systems and procedures and processes in place in your business. And, one of the things that I want to talk about as far as the details that you talked about, you definitely need to look at the details in your business. But I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, we want to get too many details, and we get inundated with too many details. And looking at details are great, but you want to make sure that you're looking at the right details. The ones that are really the most important ones that you can look at to be able to determine whether or not you need to be able to pivot in different directions to be able to make sure that your business continues to survive.
Yeah, the approach that we took is, Albert Einstein once said, be sure to make things simple, but not simpler. And so one of the tack that we took is we don't have 90% of what we need now. Let's keep it simple. Let's get at least the baseline in place, because this is going to continuously improve. We're going to continue to improve this in the years to come. It doesn't have to be perfect from the beginning. That's the mistake a lot of people make. They want everything to be perfect, from the beginning. And I even talk about this a lot when I speak about, in our world today, a lot of the teachers, gurus, and people talk about the importance of clarity. You got to have clarity. You got to be crystal clear in this. Well, the dirty little truth is that no one is crystal clear on everything. No one's crystal clear what's going to happen 3 years from now, 5 years from now, and everything else. And a lot of people get trapped in this clarity curse of trying to find exactly what it is that, they have to do, or they're supposed to be doing, or what their vision is, or that sort of thing. And they don't really start, and it traps them. And so what I found, and especially found after working with all the people that I have over the years and the entrepreneurs that I've gotten to interview and everything else, is that it's a direction that matters. You need to know your direction. You need to have a good, clear understanding of the direction you want to go. You don't have to know exactly how you're going to get there, because understanding the direction, you'll find your way there. And anybody who is listening to this, if you've had a business before where you've taken the time and all that time to do a nice business plan and put everything in place and make sure it's pretty and beautiful and has every step and everything in it, you find typically 10 minutes into starting the business, that plan's out the window, because you get hit with something you didn't expect and things don't go exactly as planned and everything else. But you have a direction, and you just continue to follow that direction, and you find your way.
I don't know if you would agree with this or not, Dave, but in my experience, the leader entrepreneur tends to be a big picture vision person anyway. And so it's easy for him or her to get into, okay, we're going to go, and they just run and run hard, and you end up with a business that's growing. But then, as you said earlier, risks being crushed by its own weight because no one's ever stopped to write down those details. So from my experience, they typically need someone or need a team of people to be the detail person. Is that what you would say? And did you have that team to kind of help you with that?
Yeah. It's interesting. My business partner and I in the business, he is the software engineer guy and everything else. And I'm the business driver, the sales side and all that. So we're good yin and yang and balance each other. But from an operational standpoint, we were only so good, right? So we had to bring in the right people, and we had some on staff. We unleashed them in a way, empowered them to start doing what they knew need to be done. See, that's the thing. A lot of things happening in companies, especially as you grow. The best people to help you with systematizing, operationalizing things are the people that are in it every single day on the ground floor. Your frontline people, your support people, your people that are in sales talking to the customer and everything. Those are the best people to help you create your systems and stuff. And a lot of companies won't do that. They'll do it at a high level. And, and I've even seen it in Fortune 500 organizations where you have somebody at the C level who hasn't been in the field in 10 years making decisions for an entire, group or area of the company. And they haven't gotten any feedback. They just think that's the way to go. And that's just, it's always a recipe for disaster. So what we did is, when we took our step back, is we looked at our leadership, and everybody, we said, okay, here are the things that we believe we need to do. What are your thoughts? Got their feedback, because remember, people support what they help to create, right? And so we got their feedback, and we said, okay, what role do you want to play in this? Where do you think you can make the most impact? Got that from them. Once we had kind of all the roles filled, then we went to those frontline people and said, okay, guys, how do we make this better? What would make your life easier? how do we remove the ambiguity and how do we move the gray area so that it's systematic for you? And then just started. And that's how we did it.
I think there's still a lot of things that we could discuss here, but I do want to move on because you said you had another tough decision, I think a more personal one. So tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. And I alluded to it a little bit earlier about in the adoption process for our daughter. So, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, we adopted internationally into China. And there's a reason that this decision that we ended up making as part of this became such an amazing thing. So when you do that, there's two programs that China has. China has what they call a healthy child program, which is where they just look at a child and they deem them pristine, perfect. They match your eye color to them, all that stuff. And it takes about 7 years to go through that program. And then they have what's called a waiting child program. And a waiting child program is a child who's not perfect. Could be missing the tip of a finger, and that's not considered pristine and perfect, right? And so those programs take about 2 years. And so when we were going down that road, we said, okay, let's look at the waiting child program. Let's go that route. And one of the craziest things is because you don't really think about this going in, but then you're faced with it, and it is the decision that you have to make, is that they put this list of all these ailments in front of you, basically. Everything from heart conditions to syphilis to brain issues to missing limbs and everything. And you have to sit there and check the ones that you're willing to take.
Wow.
And so it's the hardest decision because anything you don't check, you sit there questioning yourself, am I a bad person because I didn't check this?
Oh, my.
And so it's almost an emotional roller coaster as we go through it. And here's the crux of the story why, I always say this was the hard part from a decision-making process, but it ended up being the most phenomenal miracle in the world. And so we go through this whole thing with our adoption counselor, and we check a lot of different things. In fact, we had an adoption doctor, and even they said, look, if they have a heart condition, they're 18 months old in the Chinese orphanage, that's flexible because they wouldn't be alive if it was worse. So choose that. So we went through all that, and my wife noticed hyper and hypothyroid as part of the selections. And so she selected them because we have a family member that has that. It's a gland issue where you're either it's running too fast or it's running too slow, and you take pills to regulate it. And our adoption counselor said to us, hey, hypothyroid, we've been doing this 50 years. We've never had a kid that has that. Are you sure you want that on there? And we're like, yeah, just leave it on there. It's on there, so leave it. Not thinking much of it. So we go through the process, we finish up, and then they start to have this time where they allow you to get what's called files. Think of it like a dossier on a child, right? And China sends so many out to the world every single month, and it's first come, first served who's been in line. So for 5 months, we never even got to see a file, okay? And you can imagine what that's like, kind of an emotional roller coaster there, because you get your hopes up every month, and then you don't even get to see anything. Get your hopes up every month, and so on. And it was September of 2013, we get a call out of the blue. The files had already gone off for the month. We didn't see anything. Our adoption counselor's on the other end of the line, and she says, we've got a child for you. And we're like, what do you mean? The files have gone out to the world and everything else. And she's like, well, it just so happens that this child was found as an infant underneath a bridge about 4 blocks from the only orphanage that we work with directly in the whole country of China. And this child happens to have hyperthyroid, and you're the only family in our system that came up for that. And so we held the child for you. And so we said, well, yeah, send us the dossier, send us the file. And so, obviously with about 2 seconds of getting the file, we said yes. We were already saying yes before we even got it. And that's Hannah. That's how she came into our lives. So 6 months later, got her, picked her up, and brought her home. And 6 months later from that, going to doctors and everything, the doctor said, she was misdiagnosed. She actually doesn't have anything. She's a perfectly healthy kid. And so if you kind of put that together, here's a child that never went to the world never saw her. The only reason that she came to us is because we were the only ones that had checked for those ailments. And she should have been a healthy child to begin with. So when people ask me, why'd you go to China to get your daughter? I say, number one, because that's where she was. And number two, you can't tell me that there isn't a higher power and that miracles don't happen. Because there's no reason other than that we should have had her as our daughter.
As I say, I'm kind of speechless because I don't really know what to say after that. I mean, it's a great story.
What I'll tell you what I've taken away from it, the lesson that I've learned and that I speak about when I tell that story. I've developed a philosophy of really no regrets. I don't mean that in a narcissistic way or a non-humble way, but if you think about it, everything that had to happen, us meeting, getting Hannah that way and bringing her home, everything that had to happen to this point has gotten you where you're at. The fact that we're talking right now, a rock in space billions of years ago had to hit another rock the exact right way. A soldier takes the wrong step on a battlefield throughout history. We're not here. We don't get Hannah. Maybe we're not talking today. So I've developed this philosophy that I really don't have regrets for things, because everything that had to happen to get me to where I am had to happen exactly as it has. Now, that doesn't mean that if I had the chance to do something over with what I've learned from it, that I wouldn't do it differently, right? But I don't regret it. And I'll tell you, that's, adopting that and really fully understanding that, both in mind and soul and all that, has really made a difference in my life and for those that I've worked with and everything. And in a lot of ways takes a lot of weight off your shoulders too.
Well, I can appreciate what you're saying there, because I know Dana and I have discussed before, why did we do that? Or why did that happen that way? Not in a bad sense, but just looking back at some of the things that we've done or businesses that we've started or, choices that we've made. And you go, why did we do that? But then we see all of the fruit from that later. And it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. And, some things that we would consider mistakes turn out really for our good because of, the result of the choices that have been made. Talk a little bit, if you will, about a book that you would recommend for our audience, something that has affected the way you do your business or make your choices.
Wow, there's so many. I'm looking back at my library here that I've got sitting here. One book that I really, really love that I think is just a great read that has a lot of applications to life, business, and everything is An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth by Chris Hadfield. He's one of the most decorated astronauts in history and spent 6 months at the space station. But the book is just a fantastic read. It's a lot of fun, but it's got so many things that translate from surviving in space to surviving in business and everything else. So it's just a really good, fun read. I know a lot of us get caught up in reading, specific business books on management or sales or whatever. This is one of those ones that kind of encompasses everything, and it's really fun to read. So I like that. And then another one as of late that I think is really good if you manage a team is The Coaching Habit. It's about specific questions to be able to get more out of you and your team and to be able to have a deeper relationship with those that you work with. So those are two really good ones that I recommend for people to read.
Well, I want to shift gears here just a little bit, Dave. We have a few minutes left. I want you to share with us, something that you have done with the money that you've made up to this point as an entrepreneur. So is there some sort of exciting place that you have traveled or extravagant item that you've purchased with the money that you've made as an entrepreneur?
Well, throughout, I'm very fortunate throughout the business that I have and stuff, I've been able to travel the world over, not just, obviously to China, but everywhere from Australia to, the Europe and everywhere in between. So from a travel standpoint, I've been able to do that. For one of the things that we love that my wife and I are really, it's kind of like our hobby together, if you will, is diving. So scuba diving. And so just about any chance we get, we take the time to go to some of the best places on earth and get under the water. So we do a lot of time in Hawaii, done Great Barrier Reef and all that. We've done other areas throughout the Pacific and the Caribbean and all that sort of thing. So, and it's fun. Like Hannah comes with us now and she hangs on the boat and one of us will go in and she'll jump in the water and we'll put our goggles on and she'll get to see the fish and all that stuff. So it's become a family thing now. We spend a little extravagant on that, rent boats for an entire day, just ourselves, private crew and all that sort of thing, because it just is, the experience is worth it.
So what is one thing that's on your bucket list right now or your vision board for the future?
Geez. Let me look at it. Well, let's see. The DB11 is still up there. Hopefully in the next year or two, that's when we'll have the DB11. We are embarking on building our dream house right now. So we're at the beginning of that. So, I guess I could say that is the big thing right now. We just finalized the plans and put the payment forward and got started on it. So that's the big thing for probably the next year.
That's definitely an item that, as you get started with it, it continues to progress. And as most of us, have ever, been involved with any type of construction, there's a lot of tough decisions that'll be made during that process as well.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Dave, for being on the podcast with us today. How can the listeners reach out to you and follow you more as they finish listening to this podcast?
Yeah, the best way is to go to www.misfitentrepreneur.com. You can sign up to listen to the podcast and all the different channels from there, iTunes, Stitcher, Breaker, all the different ones. And then also I'm all over social media, either as Misfit Entrepreneur or Dave Lukas, Lukas. And if you want, for the 100th episode, we did a really cool free guidebook to go with the 10 lessons that we put out there. It's really been, a lot of people really, really like it. So if you're interested in that, you can get it free. You just need to go to www.misfitentrepreneur.com/lessons, and it's there for you. And feel free to send us an email. I always respond to anybody who sends me emails and stuff. It may not happen right away, but I always read and respond to them.
And as always, we will put those links inside of the show notes for this episode so that when it launches, you can go to the toughdecisions.net website and find Dave Lucas's episode and get those links so you have them correctly as far as the spelling and all that kind of good stuff. But thank you so much, Dave, for being with us. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you to all in the audience for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.